You know, usually when you sit down to play a game, there's this unspoken contract between you and the creator.
Right, like a set of expectations.
Yeah, exactly. You're the hero. The rules are all neatly laid out in some tutorial, and the obstacles are, well, they're always external. You
Yeah.
fight the dragon, you rescue the villagers, you win the prize. And it's comforting, I think, because the conflict is outside of you. Like if you fail, it's just a matter of leveling up your sword or your shield.
It's a beautifully simple, totally binary worldview.
Mm.
I mean, there are good guys, there are bad guys, and there is a very clearly illuminated path to victory. You never really have to question your own motives, just your reflexes.
Right. But then you step into the world of this particular text we're exploring today, and suddenly that entire comforting contract is just, it's shredded into tiny pieces.
Oh, absolutely destroyed.
We are diving straight into a choose-your-own-adventure experience today titled The Game Within the Mind of the Leviathan. And the mission for our deep dive today, for you listening, is to really walk through the 3 narrative installments of this game. We want to unpack the deep metaphorical traps and, frankly, the profound philosophical questions it just forces you to confront.
And we should probably clarify right out of the gate, this isn't your standard fantasy game. There are no swords here,
No dragons.
no dragons to slay. This is a psychological labyrinth.
Yeah.
It's a mechanism explicitly designed to interrogate your very identity. It functions more like a mirror, I'd say, reflecting our deepest neuroses about control and isolation and survival right back at us.
Okay, let's unpack this. It starts with a scene that I think is going to feel hauntingly familiar to anyone who has ever felt stuck in their own head. So you wake up, the air smells of ozone and old dust.
Very atmospheric.
Right. You're sitting in this high-backed leather chair in a stone tower. The walls are just lined with these forgotten bookshelves stretching way up into the shadows. And you look out the tall, arched windows, but there's no landscape, just a swirling gray mist.
Just a complete void where the world used to be.
Exactly, a void.
Yeah.
And the real kicker, you look around the room, and there is no door.
Just cold, ancient, indifferent stone. I mean, the immediate sensation it gives you is one of being utterly and hopelessly trapped.
It's terrifying. But on the heavy oak desk right in front of you, there are 3 envelopes, 3 invitations, basically. So envelope 1 contains a heavy silver mirror. You pick it up, expecting to see your reflection, but instead it shows the wall behind you.
Oh, I love this part.
And in the mirror, the wall isn't solid stone. It's glowing with these etched lines like a blueprint. And the text tells you that the door isn't locked and it isn't hidden. The door is a word you are refusing to say.
Wow.
Yeah, and you're handed a piece of chalk and told to write the truest thing you can.
Which is such a brilliant subversion of the typical escape room trope, you know? The obstacle isn't a physical combination lock or some hidden key under a rug. It's vulnerable honesty.
Yeah.
It's asking you to confront whatever massive truth you are repressing, like the actual truth that is keeping you frozen in this tower.
And if you can't do it, which, let's be honest, is a huge ask, there's envelope 2.
Right. Easier way out. Or so you think.
Right. So you open it and find a pair of noise-canceling headphones. You put them on, the ambient sound of the wind outside just completely vanishes, and suddenly you hear a crunch.
Yeah.
You look up, and sitting casually on one of your bookshelves is a guy in a tattered tuxedo and a jester's cap, just eating a crisp green apple.
The hallucination.
Yeah.
The archetype of the trickster. He introduces himself as Chance. Right?
Yes, Chance. And Chance tells you that you're asking the entirely wrong question. You're looking around asking how to get out. But he says you aren't locked in at all. You locked yourself out of the messy, unpredictable real world so you could sit in here and finally, quote, make something.
What's fascinating here is the psychological shift the game is demanding from the player. Let's really look at what Chance is actually doing. He forces a complete paradigm shift from victimhood to authorship.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, as a player, you naturally start with the mindset of a captive, right? Like, oh no, I'm trapped, poor me, how do I escape this tower? But Chance just flips the script entirely. He asks, why did you build this tower so high in the first place?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The game immediately challenges your core assumptions about your own limitations. The void outside isn't a threat imposed on you. It's a blank canvas you created yourself to avoid being hurt.
Which is such a heavy realization. It's like being in a mental escape room. But the ultimate twist is realizing you are the architect of the room. It's not a prison imposed by some evil wizard. It's a panic room you constructed to just, avoid the chaos of existence.
Precisely. You built the walls,
Yep.
and that realization paves the way for the final envelope. If you refuse the chalk and you refuse the jester's taunts, you are left with envelope 3.
The last resort. Inside is a blank book bound in something that feels unsettlingly warm, almost like skin.
Super creepy.
Very. As you hold it, ink starts bleeding onto the page entirely on its own, sketching the exact room you're currently sitting in. But the sketch reveals a loose floorboard you hadn't noticed under the desk.
Right.
So you pry it open, expecting to see a dark crawl space or a tunnel. But underneath isn't darkness. It's the sky. The tower is upside down. To escape, you have to literally fall up.
Inverting gravity itself. It's the ultimate metaphor for completely abandoning your current worldview.
Yeah.
To leave the safety of your isolated mind, you have to let go of absolutely everything you thought was grounded and true.
You have to surrender. So you take the leap, you fall up. But breaking out of your own mind doesn't mean you're free, does it? It just crashes you into a completely different kind of trap.
A much, much more crowded trap.
Yeah. Which brings us to the next massive shift in the narrative, moving into installment 2. You don't land softly in some peaceful meadow. Falling up crashes you directly into the harsh, demanding reality of society. You land on a beach in the blinding blue. The air is just stinging with salt.
A sensory overload compared to the quiet tower.
Exactly. The quiet void is totally gone, replaced by this roaring, desperate world, and you're immediately captured by a pack of wild, charcoal-smeared children who just throw you into a driftwood cage.
And this is where the game plays so heavily on our ingrained desire to be the protagonist. You just naturally assume these children need a hero to fight their monsters.
But they don't want a hero. They want an engine.
Right.
They want something or someone to keep them alive against the elements. And the game gives you 2 paths to survive this new cage. Envelope A is the path of the Oracle.
The storyteller.
Yeah, you weave a myth. You invent a sacred lineage for these children, turning their gritty daily survival into a divine ritual. You manipulate the narrative so the cage basically becomes a protected relic, and you become untouched, revered from the inside.
It's using information as architecture. You control the group by controlling their story.
But then there's Envelope B, the architect. You don't weave myths at all. You prove your undeniable practical competence. You show the children how to tie better knots, how to bank fires so they don't go out in the torrential rain. You become vital infrastructure.
You make yourself useful.
So undeniably useful that the cage door just becomes an inconvenience to the village's growth, so they just open it for you.
Competence as authority. You buy your freedom by becoming indispensable to them.
Okay, so what does this all mean? I have to admit, I was actually a bit lost here when I first read through this, because to me, Envelope B sounds like a totally solid plan.
It sounds like winning.
Right. You become the architect, you prove your worth, you secure your position, you keep people warm. How is that a bad thing? But the game throws a massive wrench in this and explicitly calls it a false split. Why is it a false split? Both of those paths seem like valid, clever ways to win the game.
Yeah, I totally get why that feels counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the reason the game calls it a false split is because it's critiquing our very modern definition of winning. The game calls the outcome of both of these paths the convergence.
The convergence.
Right. Because whether you manipulate them with myth as the oracle or you make yourself indispensable as the architect, both lead to a psychological condition the game calls the thinning soul. Yes, the door to the cage is technically open now, but you are not actually free.
Oh, I see. It's like being the one IT guy in the office who knows how all the ancient legacy software works.
Exactly.
You think you have ultimate job security because you're completely indispensable. You're the architect of the system, but actually you just ensured you will never, ever get promoted, and you can never take a vacation. You're trapped in the server room of your own usefulness.
That is a perfect analogy. By becoming the system that keeps the village running, by being the engine, you lose your own internal tempo. You lose your identity outside of your sheer utility to others. You are forced into an infinite game.
Wait, explain that difference really quick, the finite versus infinite game.
Sure. So in a finite game, you play to win, right? There's a set endpoint, the buzzer sounds, someone gets a trophy.
Like a football game.
Exactly. But in an infinite game, the only goal is just to keep playing, to maintain the machinery. So as the architect or the oracle, you're constantly deciding where the wood goes, how the water is filtered, who gets what. The village thrives, sure, the smokehouses are full, but the you that sat in the tower, the creative, thinking, independent self, is starving to death.
Because you've commodified yourself just to survive the group dynamics.
Precisely. You think you're the king of the island because you're in charge, but you're actually just the most heavily burdened gear in the entire machine. It's a really chilling reflection of how a lot of us operate in our daily lives.
Wow. Which is exactly why the game offers a radical third option, moving towards installment 3. Because being the system drains the soul so completely, what happens if you choose to simply, I don't know, stop being useful?
The hardest choice of all.
And that introduces us to the path of the outlier. While you're busy running the village and banking the fires, you notice a girl named Echo. She just sits out on the furthest reef.
Just watching the water.
Yeah, she doesn't join the community songs, she doesn't gather wood, she does absolutely nothing for the village. By all the normal metrics of survival, she is considered a complete waste of resources.
A burden, even.
Right. But the game gives you a choice. You can walk away from the smokehouses, leave the village, and go sit on the reef with her. You can reclaim the useless self, even if it means the village's machinery might falter without you.
It is the ultimate, terrifying rejection of the engine mentality. You are actively choosing to decommodify yourself.
And choosing this triggers the transition to the final phase of the game. You wake up on the reef, the sun is high, and the island is dead silent. So you run back to the village, maybe feeling a little guilty, ready to resume your role as the indispensable architect. But it's an abandoned ghost town.
Empty.
The children are gone. The perfect knots you tied are just left discarded in the sand like shed skins.
The rescue came.
The rescue came. But they didn't take you. Because you chose the useless path on the reef, the world realized it actually didn't need your machinery to keep turning.
Someone else figured it out.
Someone else built the fire, someone else flagged down the ship. Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is a massive, catastrophic blow to the player's ego. You spent all this time agonizing over the village, thinking you were the essential linchpin holding reality together for these kids, but you weren't. You were actually just a footnote on a map that's already been burned.
It's what the text brilliantly calls the autopsy of the island. It is a brutal unmasking of the savior complex that so many of us walk around with. You wander into the ashes of the village fire pit, and there you find 3 leather-bound books.
Echo's journals.
Yes, they are filled with Echo's jagged, incredibly knowing handwriting. And her observation here is just piercing. Let's really look at what she writes. She says that she watched you looking at the horizon for help, but really, you were just letting the others fade so you could shine.
Oh, man. I need a second just to absorb that. That line is completely devastating. Let me quote the exact phrase from the text. You weren't waiting for a rescue. You were just waiting for the audience to leave so you could finally be yourself.
It completely recontextualizes every single action you took as the architect or the oracle. You thought you were sacrificing yourself for the good of the children. But Echo exposes the truth. You were using them as an audience to validate your own existence.
That is so dark, but so true.
Right. You were never in any real danger on that island. You were just putting on a grand, exhausting performance of survival because you were terrified of what you would be without an audience to applaud your usefulness.
Wow. Okay, that is a heavy pivot. Because now the audience is actually gone, the illusions of being the essential savior are stripped away entirely. Now the player has to face the rawest, most unvarnished version of themselves.
The core self.
And this brings us to the climax, the final trajectory of the game. The game offers you 3 final character nodes to embody, and what's fascinating is that the creator uniquely paired each of these paths with a real-world thriller novel.
Which acts as a thematic sync along with a final note from Echo.
Let's break those down because the connections here reveal so much about the psychology of isolation. First, there's the Sovereign. In this path, you realize the engine was always stalled by the weight of other people's needs. So, you move into the most reinforced driftwood hut on the island, and you choose to rule a kingdom of ghosts. You embrace the terrifying freedom of being the only reflection left. The silence isn't a void anymore, it's your throne. Now, this path is synced with the book One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware.
And that sync makes perfect sense when you look at the mechanics of that novel. One Perfect Couple is a thriller about being trapped on a deserted island where the social dynamics become incredibly toxic and, well, deadly.
Right, it gets really bad.
It explores the dark side of survival when you are isolated with someone who wants total control. By choosing the Sovereign, you are essentially becoming the villain of a Ruth Ware novel. You are choosing total dominating control over a dead environment rather than risking vulnerability with others. It's the ultimate toxic isolation.
Exactly, it's choosing power over connection. Then there's the second path, the Revenant. In this node, you start to suspect the village wasn't a refuge at all, but a burial ground for the versions of yourself you tried to leave behind in that very first stone tower.
You look backwards.
Yeah, you walk back into the quiet forest to dig up the loose floorboard of your memory. You want to go back to the beginning, even if it means accepting that you might have been the villain all along. Echo's note here warns you. She says, shadows don't grow in the dark, but secrets thrive there. And this one is synced with the thriller, What Have You Done by Sherry Lapina.
Another brilliant thematic pairing. I mean, Sherry Lapina's book is all about a sleepy small town where everyone has dark secrets, and it's driven by the terrifying consequences of past actions finally coming to light.
The skeletons in the closet.
Exactly. The Revenant path is exactly that. It's the player deciding to stop running forward and instead turn around to excavate their own buried guilt. It's an agonizing path because it requires admitting that the monster wasn't the island or the children. The monster was whatever you buried under the floorboards of your own psyche.
It's confronting the shadow self head on. And finally, the third path, the Voyager.
The Voyager.
In this ending, you gather up all those abandoned children's ropes, the very fibers they used to bind you into the system, and you use your leftover architect skills to weave a raft. But you aren't looking for a rescue ship. You push off the beach and sail into the swirling gray mist, discarding the island entirely like a skin that no longer fits. This path syncs with The Guest List by Lucy Foley.
Which is deeply fitting, too. The guest list involves characters trapped on a remote, stormy island for a wedding where resentments boil over into murder. The core theme is the desperate need to escape a toxic, confined social environment that is slowly destroying everyone. Getting off the island at all costs. Right. The Voyager path mirrors that escape. And Echo's final note for the Voyager is incredibly profound. She writes, "A raft is just a room that moves, and you are always too big for the rooms they built for you."
A raft is just a room that moves. I love that so much. It's such a bittersweet ending. And what makes these final choices even more impactful is what you find scattered throughout the menus as you make your decision.
The memento scraps.
Yes. Hidden in the margins are what the game calls memento scraps. They are little coffee-stained notes representing the, quote, story of us, the intermediate life that the player entirely missed out on while they were so busy playing the sovereign and obsessing over survival.
Right. These are the moments that have zero utilitarian value. Things like finding a piece of blue sea glass on the shore and pretending it was a piece of the sky.
Or the night the children stayed up late trying to name the stars. Things that had absolutely no survival metric, no efficiency bonus, but were the actual substance of living. So I have to ask you, listening to this right now, which path would you take when the audience is finally gone? Are you the sovereign ruling the silence, the revenant digging up the past, or the voyager sailing into the mist?
This raises an important question, perhaps the central thesis of the entire text. The game beautifully, and I'd say ruthlessly, critiques our modern obsession with survival as a virtue in and of itself.
Oh, absolutely.
We live in a culture that absolutely idolizes the hustle, the grind. We praise the architect who builds the biggest fire and ties the perfect knot. But those memento scraps reveal the underlying tragedy of that mindset. Everyone on that island was so busy surviving that they forgot to actually live.
They missed the blue glass. They missed naming the stars because they were too busy checking the inventory of the smokehouse.
Exactly. They missed the poetry of existence because they were trapped in the machinery of efficiency. And Echo's final realization out on the reef ties it all together so perfectly. She stayed behind. She did nothing useful. She just watched the tide come in. And she writes that by the time the water reached her knees, she realized the outlier, the useless one who refused to be an engine, wasn't the one left behind. She was the only one who truly arrived.
Because she was actually present in the world, not just maintaining a system to hide from it. What an incredible sweeping arc. Let's just look at the journey. The game within the mind of the Leviathan takes you on. You start in a mental tower, hiding from the world because you think you're trapped, only to realize you locked yourself in.
A self-imposed prison.
So you fall up into the world and immediately overcompensate by becoming the literal engine of an island, losing your entire identity to the demands of the group. And finally, your audience abandons you, leaving you on an empty beach, forced to face the terrifying freedom of deciding who you are when nobody needs you to be anything at all.
It meticulously strips away every single layer of ego, utility, and performance until there is nothing left but the raw, unadorned self.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something completely different to chew on. We talked a lot about escaping the cage, about sailing away into the mist as the Voyager.
But think about what happens after the Voyager sails into that mist.
Yeah.
A raft is just a room that moves, as Echo said. If you choose to sail away, how long until you hit another shore? How long until you find another group of people and immediately start tying their knots and banking their fires all over again?
Um,
The ultimate challenge of the game might not be escaping the island at all. It might be resisting the overwhelming urge to build a brand new cage the second you hit dry land.
Oh, that is a fantastic point. Are we just doomed to keep building the engine everywhere we go? That is definitely going to stick with me. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives you build for yourself. Keep looking for the blue glass on the shore. And remember, sometimes the absolute bravest thing you can do is refuse to be the engine. Until next time.